What happened to Denzel Washington's children, the ones raised in the shadow of an Oscar-winning legend, is not a story about pressure or privilege, but one of quiet endurance, generational discipline, and the long private work of turning a famous last name into a legacy of their own. His eldest son, John David Washington, arrived on July 28, 1984, in Los Angeles, a city already familiar with the surname, but not yet prepared for how far it would travel. Born into a household where both parents were artists, but where values came before accolades, John David was never treated like a prince. He was taught to show up, put in the work, and expect no shortcuts. Denzel and Pauletta didn't just raise their kids in Hollywood, they raised them against it. John David grew up surrounded by cameras, but rarely in front of them. He went to Campbell Hall School, where he blended into the crowd through sports, not status running track, playing basketball, and eventually finding his identity in football. For a while, it seemed like that helmet would become his career, not a costume. And maybe that was the point. The gridiron became his stage, and the anonymity of athletics gave him a freedom that acting, with all its comparisons to his father, never could. He earned a scholarship to Morehouse College in Atlanta and played running back with intensity and discipline. After graduating in 2006, he signed briefly with the St. Louis Rams, then played overseas for the Rhein-Fire in Germany, followed by a stint in the United Football League. But even as his body absorbed the injuries of a professional career, something else lingered beneath the surface, something inherited but repressed, the desire to perform, the need to speak, move, and break out from under a helmet. When the UFL collapsed in 2012, he was 28, and suddenly the path ahead was blank. That's when the buried instinct returned. Years earlier, as a child, he'd appeared in Malcolm X, a small role beside his father's towering lead. It was just a flash, but enough to plant a seed. When football faded, he went back to that moment. Not because it was easy, but because it was hard. He knew what it meant to be compared to Denzel, and he still walked toward it. He didn't ask for favors, didn't lean on the family name. He auditioned, waited tables, stayed quiet. He landed a role on HBO's Ballers, but it was Spike Lee's BlacKkKlansman that kicked the door open. Not just because of the story or the director, but because of how he played it. Full force, sharp voice, totally his own. The Golden Globe nomination didn't just validate his talent. It marked the moment John David Washington stepped out from behind the Washington name and proved there was room for another the industry noticed. But more importantly, his parents did. When he heard his name read aloud that morning, he didn't celebrate alone. His father wrapped him in a hug. His mother cried over the phone. That moment, not the red carpets, not the magazine covers, became the real win. Because for John David, success was never about becoming someone new. It was about becoming fully himself and honoring the path his parents carved by building one beside it. Acting for him wasn't a shortcut into legacy. It was the long, bruising route toward ownership, from Tenet to Amsterdam, from Broadway's, the piano lesson to whatever comes next. John David Washington has made it clear he's not the son of Denzel Washington. He's John David, and the surname isn't a shadow, it's a foundation. If John David had to wrestle the spotlight in a submission, Katia Washington chose instead to reshape it quietly from behind the scenes. Born on November 27, 1986 in Los Angeles, she grew up with the same foundation of discipline, humility, and curiosity that defined the Washington household. But Katia, the second child, carried a different kind of creative fire, less performative, more architectural. While her brother chased football fields and film sets, Katia gravitated towards structure and language, drawn not to applause but to meaning. At school, she was the observant one, always reading, always processing. Her parents didn't push her into the arts, but the arts seemed to find her anyway. By the time she was college-bound, it was clear that her mind was wired for complexity. She enrolled at Yale, not for prestige, but for intellectual weight, and emerged in 2010 with a degree and a question: what kind of storyteller did she want to become? Unlike her brother, Katia didn't need to test herself in the public eye. She entered the world of filmmaking as a producer, a role with less spotlight but more control, and it suited her. There, she could move entire narratives without ever stepping in front of a lens, while others speculated about her private nature. Those who worked with her saw clarity, rigor, and vision. She worked quietly on projects that mattered: Fences, Breaking, Sharp Stick, Malcolm and Marie. Each one a deliberate step, never rushed, always sharp. For Katia, producing wasn't just a job. It was a way to protect the dignity of storytelling, the same way her parents had protected the dignity of their home. She didn't need to prove herself with headlines. The work and the silence around it was the statement. But behind that quiet was a backbone carved from watching two parents navigate fame without losing their soul. Katia learned from her father how to balance art with integrity, and from her mother, she inherited the strength to do it without seeking approval. While the industry often shouts to be heard, she chose to whisper and still be listened to. And if Katia was the architect, her younger brother Malcolm was the spark, a twin born into rhythm, energy, and an instinct for momentum. He and Olivia entered the world on April 10, 1991 in Los Angeles from the start. Malcolm stood out not for being loud, but for being alive. At Windward School, he made his mark on the basketball court, not just as a player, but as a force, first-team, all-league MVP of the Winter Classic, academic All-American. Every stat told a story of intensity balanced with focus. Like his father, he found poetry in motion, but unlike Denzel, Malcolm wasn't destined for the stage, not immediately. He was drawn to film, but from a different angle. He didn't want to perform, he wanted to construct after high school. He attended the University of Pennsylvania, studying film while continuing to play basketball. It was during these years that Malcolm began blending his athletic rigor with creative discipline. He interned, studied, then stepped into production. His first jobs weren't glamorous. He worked as an assistant director on short films, watching, learning, absorbing the pace of set life. He shadowed Spike Lee, just as his father had decades earlier, not as a shortcut, but as apprenticeship. When his directorial debut, The Piano Lesson, premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2024, it was no family favor that got him there. He earned it script to screen. And when the credits rolled, the name Malcolm Washington no longer meant Denzel's son. It meant director, storyteller, builder of legacy. His siblings were right beside him, Katia producing, John David acting not as a gimmick, but as a kind of generational symphony. Each had found their instrument, and Malcolm was ready to conduct. The Washington family never chased fame, but they understood how to master it without being consumed. Katia built the scaffolding, Malcolm lit the match, and both, in their own way, proved that you don't need to perform to carry a name forward. You just have to move with purpose, and never forget where the foundation came from. If Malcolm brought energy and Katia brought structure, Olivia Washington was the soul that stitched everything together. Born just minutes after Malcolm on April 10, 1991, she didn't inherit the family's loudest spotlight. She stepped into its quietest corner. And yet, there's something about her that makes people pause. Not because she demands it, but because she carries herself like someone who's already listened to the noise and decided she doesn't need it. While her twin brother battled through basketball drills and late-night film edits, Olivia danced in the living room, played the piano softly after dinner, and absorbed the rhythm of the house without forcing herself into its center. Her artistic spirit wasn't crafted under pressure. It bloomed in the calm that her parents worked so hard to create. But that spirit had depth. She enrolled at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts and graduated in 2013, choosing the long path of mastery over the fast lane of fame. Olivia didn't want shortcuts, she wanted credibility. In a family of headline makers, she didn't use the Washington name as currency. Instead, she approached her craft like a sculptor patient, precise, often unseen until the work was done. Her early roles were small but steady: Mr. Robot, Empire, Madoff appearances that built muscle, not buzz. And then she started choosing roles with weight. She stood out in Breaking, playing against John Boyega in a performance so layered it earned a Sundance Special Jury Award for Ensemble Cast. She took roles in The Butler, A Holiday in Harlem, and The Little Things, delivering characters that were never loud but always fully human. Her presence on screen is often described as stillness, with fire underneath a kind of quiet authority that doesn't need to be loud to be felt. Off-screen, Olivia was even more private. No talk show circuits, no red carpet overexposure, just the work. And when Denzel spoke about her publicly, it was always with a father's pride that was so strong, it didn't need embellishment. She's coming for her brother, he once said with a smile. But everyone in the room knew he meant more than that. He meant Shed earned her place in the family's creative legacy, not because of her last name, but because of her discipline, her vision, her grace. In many ways, Olivia is the Washington child who best mirrors both of her parents at once. She has her mother Pauletta's steady warmth and refusal to bend to public expectation, and her father's quiet intensity, the kind that turns into gravity over time. But more than that, Olivia represents what the Washington household really produced. Not stars, not headlines, but full human beings with purpose and backbone. And when the four of them, John, David, Katia, Malcolm, and Olivia, showed up at Denzel's Broadway opening for Othello in March 2025, it wasn't just about supporting their father. It was a family of creators walking side by side, each with their own lane and their own voice, showing what legacy actually looks like when it's lived, not claimed together. They are proof that fame doesn't have to break you, that success can coexist with privacy, that greatness doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just works hard, shows up, and holds the line. For Denzel and Pauletta, the greatest script they ever wrote wasn't for the screen. It was the one they raised, 4 children who chose to honor their family name. Not with entitlement, but with contribution, and in a town that often forgets what really matters. That's the rarest legacy of all. If you found this breakdown powerful and want more deep dives into the hidden lives of Hollywood's forgotten children, subscribe to our channel. Your support brings these invisible stories to light. Thanks for listening.